So yeah, this is an article I read from CNN this morning. Hurricane Ian's death toll rises as crews in Florida go door to door in search of survivors in decimated neighborhoods. There was also one that said various homes that were basically on islands in Florida have been decimated now. There were some pictures of this on Twitter, like the island type luxury homes in Florida that are just basically on the water, that obviously got absolutely obliterated by the hurricane. And if you look at, we're going to talk about Cuba in a second.
We're standing in a mangrove
Hurricane and
I counted
their
some
disaster relief
dozen
efforts. Whoops, accidentally played a video. But the way that Florida houses are designed are not, the infrastructure is not designed to sustain a natural disaster like this, right? There's a lot more that could be done, a lot more money that could be invested into not only disaster relief, but disaster prevention. And the way that the housing and the neighborhoods and the infrastructure overall is structured is not necessarily structured in a good way to combat a hurricane. Like I was saying, they have little like island houses. They have a bunch of houses that almost look like they're floating on top of the water. So obviously those are going to get destroyed by a hurricane. But, you have these giant luxury housing developers and these giant real estate companies just building housing wherever they can, wherever there's high population high income populations who can afford those housing. And it's a perfect example of exchange value over use value, right? Just go back to the most basic Marxist concept you can. Exchange value, capitalist production is the production of surplus value, which is measured in exchange value, how much a commodity can be exchanged for other things, represented as money. So that sounds complicated, but basically, capitalists and luxury real estate developers are building houses that will make them the most money, rather than building the houses that bring people the most use value, the houses that are the most useful commodity to people, houses that are designed to be sustainable, houses that are designed for disaster prevention. Instead of this, we just have houses that are basically designed for luxury and houses that are designed for profit, which has effects when it comes to the climate crisis, and has effects when we're dealing with tropical storms and stuff, natural disasters, which may, continue to increase with the climate crisis, probably will. So that is Florida. All right, that's how Florida has dealt with it. Pretty devastating. Many houses are destroyed. Many people are displaced. As CNN said there, you have people going door to door, but the government response to these natural disasters is still not what it should be, right? They still do not take care of people the way that they should. And because of capitalism, right, if your home gets destroyed, the bank's going to tell you you're shit out of luck, unless you have homeowners insurance that you pay for every single month, or hurricane insurance or whatever, which is an added premium or an added cost that they use to profit off you, use to profit off your fear of hurricanes. But the U.S. response to these natural disasters is not what it could be, especially if you look at like the military. Like Ian Angus in his book Facing the Anthropocene suggests that the military, or at least part of it, be transformed into what he calls climate corps. So basically just humanitarian relief, right? So when a hurricane hits Florida, you send a bunch of the National Guard there and they help people, they rescue people, they do construction projects, they rebuild the infrastructure. And my roommate's in the Army, or he's in the National Guard. He's a drill right now, just sitting in a barrack. They just sit in barracks and really don't do anything. They do training from time to time, and then if you get deployed, obviously, you do something then. But a lot of the time, the military, is having their resources, their energy, and their time wasted when it could be diverted to something like cleanup, rescue, reconstruction, stuff like that. But of course, we have a capitalist imperialist government, not a socialist government that helps people. So they don't do that. TikTok fans or TikTok viewers, we are live on Twitch, Facebook, and YouTube as well. Join us over there for the full experience. Thank you for being here, though. Sorry, I just figured I'd say that. But anyways, Biden has still been bragging about all the aid that he's given to Puerto Rico, though, in the Biden administration, the Biden White House. Despite the fact that they've been giving about the same amount of aid to Puerto Rico that Donald Trump did. They increased it a little bit. The one thing that they did do better than Trump, and, here's one way at least, where Biden has actually been better than Trump. When Hurricane Maria hit Puerto Rico in 2017, Trump originally withheld funds. He said, we're not going to help you with this at all. We're not going to give you any disaster relief, even though Puerto Rico is a territory and the U.S. controls them like a colony. It refuses to give Puerto Rico their independence because they want to exploit Puerto Rican resources. Despite that, we never take care of Puerto Rico when there's a hurricane. And Donald Trump literally said, we're not going to give you anything. Until eventually he did. Eventually he gave about the same amount that Biden's giving. But again, Biden's been publishing all these things about how much his administration is giving to Puerto Rico, but it's basically just a media blitz, a media fluff up of Biden just talking about Puerto Rico. Biden sending money to Puerto Rico. Biden sending money to Puerto Rico. They say it over and over and over again, when in reality, he's giving about the same amount to Puerto Rico that Trump gave, which is still far from being enough. And in this book by Dan Kovalik, The Plot to Overthrow Venezuela, he talks about Puerto Rico at one point. And I don't know when this book was written, like 2019, I think. And he says that Puerto Rico's disaster infrastructure, their disaster prevention infrastructure, is not where it needs to be. It's not even close. It needs way more funding if they're going to survive another hurricane like Hurricane Maria. If they're going to have a better chance of helping people survive this deadly hurricane. But they didn't. I mean, Biden invested a little bit into that disaster infrastructure, but like I said, it's not any more than what the U.S. has been investing into Puerto Rico's disaster infrastructure. So again, Hurricane Ian, or Hurricane Fiona, the last hurricane that hit Puerto Rico, has had devastating effects. Absolutely devastating effects. So, I guess I can say this all I want, though, right? I can say that the U.S. isn't doing enough to help Puerto Rico. The U.S. isn't doing enough to help Florida. They're giving money, but it's not enough money. They're sending people to help, but it's not enough people to help. But how do I know that for sure? How can I know for sure that the U.S. isn't doing enough or isn't doing everything they can? I know that for sure because Hurricane Ian hit Cuba. And Danny Haifong says this: in Cuba, no one dies or becomes homeless from a natural disaster. Not a single life was taken by Hurricane Ian in Cuba. In Florida, hundreds are assumed dead from the same hurricane. Don't let anyone tell you that there isn't a massive difference between socialism and capitalism. So true. And Cuba's infrastructure was hit hard. Their electrical grid was hit hard, which is an added negative for them, or an added problem for them, because of the U.S. embargo, because the U.S. is surrounding them with their troops and not letting them trade with the outside world, so it's hard to get resources in to develop new infrastructure. But even despite that, because Cuba focused all their country's resources, because they focused their country's surplus, their country's labor, their government's efforts on disaster relief, and because they don't have a capitalist system of housing in Cuba, so everybody has a house, and they're not insanely expensive. You're not paying exorbitant rent costs to a landlord every month. Because of that, hurricanes don't make people homeless in Cuba. They're resettled by the government. And we saw something very similar in Cuba's response to the pandemic, where they had something like under 100 people die from the pandemic. And then we have the U.S. telling us that they can't do this. They can't help us, and we all just need to get back to work. And we need to be fiscally responsible, and we can't spend any money on the people. We have to keep sending billions of dollars to fight more wars. They tell you this over and over and over again, to the point where some people have been indoctrinated with this ideology and they actually believe it. Meanwhile, Cuba, who's under an embargo, a small island country right under the nose of the U.S. empire, is combating these pandemics and these natural disasters way better than the U.S., investing their resources in their people, not investing their resources in endless war and militarism all around the world like the U.S. and they're having better results. Their people are getting better results because socialism is superior to capitalism. Having a planned economy that's oriented towards helping people and making people's lives better and bringing people out of poverty, that is better than the capitalist system. And that's why Cuba did better with their hurricane response.